today we are live with a team of highly acclaimed panelists that know a lot about what they're talking about in the industry. So I'll let them introduce themselves. We've got, like I mentioned, we've got Tim White from AkzoNobel, we've got Bradley Torneau from BASF, Tanya Scheidel on the line from AI Canada, Chris Chesney from Repairify, and Dominic Serra from PDR Canada. So how are y'all doing today?
Great, thank you.
Doing really good.
Awesome. So why don't we kick it off with Tim, and then we'll kind of go across the line, starting with Tim and then Brad, Tanya, Chris, and Dominic. Let us know how long you've been in the industry and kind of what your role entails on a day-to-day basis there.
Okay, yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking on these topics, which are so close to my heart and I'm passionate about. I've been in the industry now for 38 years. Most training classes, I take people back. Can you remember the summer of '84 is the year I started? Straight out of school into, I'm a journey embodiment by trade, and slowly progressed through. I've worked as regional managers in England for quite a few years, running different networks, and I had an opportunity to move to Canada. I moved to Canada, been, I'd like to say, successful in my career so far whilst I've been here, and I joined AkzoNobel. I'm just finishing my 4th year, just about to start my. And what I do daily is I look after performance groups. I do on-site consulting and lots of training, in-class and webinar training.
Absolutely, yeah. And I see you're all across Canada too. You're not just focused on one region. You were out in Atlantic Canada last week, right?
Yes, we're in Fredericton.
Awesome. And Brad, with BASF, how long have you been with the company there and in the industry at large?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invite. I started my trade in the automotive refinish industry in 1998. I worked as a refinish technician till about August of 2017 when I came on board with BASF. So I have a lot of experience with OEM repair procedures. We did a lot of warranty work for the OEMs when I was out in the field. I've been with BASF as the Western Canadian Regional Trainer since August of 2017, so I'm just about to start my 5th year. My day-to-day operations are classroom training, webinar training, and just coordinating everything with different government agencies and OEMs across my territory.
So a lot of moving parts there for you, Brad.
Yes.
A lot of teaching and a lot of learning, I'm sure, on the municipal side. Things are always changing there too. It's another one. So awesome. We're so glad to have you. Yeah. And Tanya, what about your time with AIA and in the industry? Let us know.
Yeah, so I mean, my time in the industry has been solely around AIA, and I've been there for coming up on 6 years now. And it's kind of nice. I started from, collision coordinator, and I've worked my way up. I'm now the manager of the collision sector within AIA. And basically, mostly that deals with iCar training and stuff like that. So dealing with the team there and trying to help get courses going across Canada.
Absolutely, and a lot of moving parts, of course, too, with all the collision repair shops in Canada and compliancy. It's always a big one, and as we know, iCar is a big body of governing standard or collision repair standards. So a lot of hard work there. And Chris from Repairify, I know you have you're the VP of training for Repairify here. So let us know how long you've been in the industry and what experience you bring here.
Oh, you said industry. So I was going to say I'm the new guy because I've been with Repairify for 8 months, but this is my 52nd year in the industry. I've spent most of my time, all of my time in the mechanical side, but I'm in charge of training and organizational development, as well as I have responsibility for our research and development team within Repairify, and am involved in all sorts of industry promotion, doing gigs like this, doing keynote speeches around the country, dealing with electric vehicles, all sorts of technologies. But what I do on a day-to-day basis is I'm privileged to lead a team of about 40 people that are really focused on helping collision center technicians calibrate vehicles properly, scan vehicles properly, perform the right repairs on vehicles, especially electronic repairs, and more importantly, to prepare our own remote services team to be able to serve our customers in an appropriate way that assists them in serving their customer, which is the motorist.
Absolutely, big moving parts, and especially with your long history in the industry, you've probably seen so much change, and especially on the technological front, working there in mechanics. And I don't think a lot of people think about how much goes into manning the entire database of Repairify diagnostics. So hats off to you. Thank you for all that you do in Repairify. Finally, Dominic Serra of PDR Canada. Dominic, tell us about your time in the industry, leading your PDR team and teaching everyone about the magic of PDR.
Yeah, hello everyone. I've been in the PDR industry for about, I think, my 26th year. So I kind of started in Canada when a lot of our tools were handmade. So what we do is we specialize in hail damage repair, and we work with auto body and collision centers, in catastrophes, service insurance companies, and we also hold the retail end of it, doing door dents. And I'm finding that PDR is being more and more embraced in the auto body industry. And what we do is we also run a training facility and train technicians. So I find that I feel that PDR should be very much a part of the auto body industry, and I encourage body shops to learn this, to embrace it.
Absolutely, and especially as we'll get into the current situation that we're in right now, and the repair versus replace question in the face of part shortages. PDR is a hugely valuable technique, but we'll get to all of that stuff later. But thank you so much for being on with us, everyone, today, for those introductions. But just to kick things off, let's keep it pretty general. Obviously, we're in this so-called post-pandemic era now. I guess that's what we're calling it. But things are a little bit different. We're shifting to, there was a lot of online learning during the pandemic. Now there's like some hybrid stuff. There's also some in-person training that's back on the table. But from your own perspectives, we'll kind of just open it up to the table here. Could you tell us what each of you have been hearing from collision centers or people in the shops on the ground repairing the vehicles? What are some of the challenges that they're facing right now, whether it comes to pushing vehicles through or just in terms of getting material, getting techs? What are some of the biggest challenges you see people facing right now, and what's working to address these challenges? Who wants to start?
Sure, I'll start the party off. I guess the feedback I'm getting from a lot of our shops when I travel around and do some training and I talk to shop owners and technicians is obviously the big question is parts and people. Every shop is struggling to find new talent, keep existing talent, and of course, get the parts that they need to complete the repairs. Another issue that we hear quite frequently is cycle times. Every shop is looking to reduce their cycle times, put more cars out in a given day, and paint profitability. How can you do more with less? What is a lot of questions I get regarding that is what is the best products to be using? Because all the paint companies have a vast assortment of products, but you got to find the product that fits that shop, that schedule, their equipment the best. So we're hearing a lot about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of what we've been hearing on the same front. What about Tim? Are you hearing the same thing? I'm assuming is
one of the biggest challenges I hear every time I speak with customers or hold training classes is how difficult it can be to find the correct OE repair procedures to repair that vehicle correctly. That seems to be the biggest challenge at the minute. And I do a lot of training with estimating consistency and repair planning. And one rule I always lay down to everybody that I talk to in the classroom is number one rule of vehicle repair is safety. And in order to do that, we have to have the correct OEM repair procedures to do that.
Absolutely. And accessing those, there's a variety of different ways to access them, but a lot of the times it requires a subscription or a lot of money that shops can't afford right now in the way that things are. So what are your suggestions? I mean, well, to Tanya's point, to Tanya here, as AIA, from the general scope of things and iCar, are you hearing similar things along the lines of what Tim and Brad have mentioned?
Absolutely. And like they've hit the nail on the head in terms of what we're hearing, at least from the iCar side of things. Also, with the labor shortage and everything, the loss of skilled technicians. So it's not just the labor shortage, but it's people moving between shops and taking those skills with them as they go. So, but yeah, those are the big things.
Yeah, when you invest so much training money into somebody and then watching them walk away, it's I have heard from people that we've spoken to too, there's a retention problem in certain areas, but it's a bigger problem that is more than just something that the shop can address. I mean, it's an overarching industry problem. There's a big umbrella of all different moving parts that need to feed into it. But Chris, from a more North American perspective, you speak to American shops as well. So what are you hearing along these topics?
Well, all of these issues are in play globally, not just in Canada or North America. And, so we deal with parts issues, to Brad's point, we deal with cycle times. And to Tim's point, it's difficult to find the service information, the repair procedures, and all of those provide opportunity for solutions. What we really focus on currently, and what I'm focused on, hyper-focused on, is finding ways to scale talent and technology. It's difficult to find technicians. And if you find a technician that you want to invest in, you still have to grow their skill sets. They don't come out of school with a pristine experience level that you can put to work and be productive day one. And then technology, it's difficult at times to afford all of the technology that's needed in many cases. ADAS adds to that. All the new safety systems really increase the investment requirement to be able to service those vehicles. And then all the service information systems that are available from all the OEMs. And to Tim's point, they don't write those systems to a standard. They write them the way they write them. And we have to deal with, number one, reading the service information that's available to us. And number two, trying to find what we're looking for. So what it's done for us is really established an opportunity to scale talent. And by that, I mean identifying where skills are needed and finding ways to bridge that gap without having to hire somebody, or by applying the right education model to grow that skill internally. And two, technology, whether it be information, parts is part of that technology equation at the end of the day, as is anything that affects cycle time. And so it's how do we scale or find those technologies that can bridge those gaps that we have. I may have certain technologies in the shop, but I have that one or two vehicle, those model years or those OEMs that I don't service very often, but I do today, and I don't have a solution for it. How do I bridge that gap? And so finding ways to scale those two problems is really what we're focused on and trying to help with all the issues that were mentioned by everybody on the call.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great point made by Chris. I think the skills are constantly changing with how vehicles are evolving. And the vehicles are evolving so quickly, from a training perspective, we just can't keep up with it as well. So that's another challenge that we have every day.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons behind the scaling of technology is because, and the scaling of talent is because technology grows at such a steep curve that we can't apply traditional methods to the problem.
Yeah.
And keeping up to date, finding those OEM procedures. Like you could find an OEM procedure the day before, but then God forbid something changes the next day. So like you're saying, it just changes so fast, and adapting to these things, a lot of people, it can be too much to handle. But when you hear these issues from collision repair centers, these challenges that they're facing, are they coming to you kind of with an idea of training that can help in mind? Or are they like, what can we do? Because for us, it's kind of a what can we do scenario. Just there's so much going on right now. Where do we start training wise?
Well, what I see is that when you have a problem, you tend to turn to traditional, comfortable ways of solving that problem. And in education, especially automotive education, that's the things that Tim and Brad do on a daily basis. Dominic, that really are the traditional things that we've always done. We try to put butts and seats in front of us so that we can share with them our knowledge and experience and help them put that into action in the service bay. And those are noble things. I don't think there's anything more noble than the automotive technician educator in this industry that really certainly doesn't do it for the money. They do it because they want to help people repair that vehicle in the bay tomorrow morning. But how do we bring new light to that and scale that in a way that becomes more effective? Today, cycle time, Brad mentioned cycle time. That's king. We've got to get the car in and get the car out. We don't have time to stop long enough to allow tech to go to a class. I'll say an ADAS class. What is an ADAS class? So, so traditionally we'd send them to a class that dipped them in everything ADAS and required them to touch everything that's possible, when the real need may be that Tim has a deficiency in understanding radar calibrations, and we need to remediate that only. So how do we build adaptive content that identifies that knowledge gap, remediates that, and puts them back in the bay so that they can be productive again in a short period of time? And that's where we're focusing our work in trying to bring those types of things into play to help the technicians get the tools and the skills they need in a short period of time, rather than putting them in a class where they come out saying, oh, I knew more than the instructor. I could have taught that class, when in reality, they needed that one nugget. They just missed it because their attitude was bad, because the information they were hearing, they already knew.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about looking at it from, some people are looking at it from a grander scale and looking at it from a bird's eye view. We don't understand this entire topic, but there's really just one part of that topic that you need to focus on. And it's not going to take an all-day, 3-day course that you need to fly across the country for. So taking the time taking the time to understand those parts, and those are the things that are affecting your cycle time too. There's other factors, of course, but that's tiny things are the things that really serve as hiccups, like Tim was saying, finding the OEM procedures and struggling and hitting your head against the wall because you can't find them.
Yeah, and I think Chris made a good point there, that when we deliver any training classes, if the student takes away one piece of information that's going to help them in their job daily, then it's a win. It really is. So yeah, Chris, that was a great point that you made there, and I will echo that all day long.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if I can jump in, like, I completely agree. And I'm really happy that, since I've been with iCar, watching the curriculum develop from, you need to be in the class for 3 hours, where you've got a repetition of some things, to, okay, we've got some online courses and it's only an hour long, or it's only half an hour long. And so that way they can be more in depth with very specific topics, so people can get the information that they need instead of having it repeated over multiple courses.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think some people might hear the terms in depth and online course and be like, what? No, there's no way it's more in depth than, but when you're focusing on the nitty gritties like that and the tiny things, and you're taking an hour to look at one part of the procedure, it is helpful. And then you're also taking out the time of travel. So, online training can be beneficial. We cannot survive on it being the only thing, but that's the movement we're going on. So, perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dominic, what do you feel on the side from PDR training? What are you hearing from people that you're on PDR? Do you think that they're finding, you have more people coming to you saying, like, we just can't get new parts, we need to replace or repair more than we're replacing? What are you hearing right now in terms of PDR and the people you train?
I definitely have to agree with everyone. There is a major problem with parts. I'm seeing vehicles wedged up in body shops for weeks at a time because parts are not available. I'm noticing that PDR is becoming more of an asset to these people. And back to the original little conversation, I think Chris was saying that sometimes people can't afford to lose their important technician for a week or 2 weeks. And that's why building small and sometimes, like, if you guys are providing training for the body shop in their place of work, they're not losing their tech. It's invaluable. You can't put a price tag on knowledge. It's not even about what it costs to get trained, what you're trying to learn. I find in this industry, if you learn one thing from a small training class, you'd have won.
Exactly, right? Like everyone's.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
And there is a major parts problem. Like our company comes in and out of body shops on a weekly basis, and I am telling you that we are seeing a major holdup on repairs because parts aren't available. And I tell you, when it's hail damage, we can help because there's a such thing as push to paint. But when it's collision, I mean, that's going to be a big learning curve. On I don't know how these body shops are getting around that when there's no way out other than a new part.
Yeah, if you can't PDR out a total loss,
No.
that's not going to be the word. So, but yeah, exactly like you're saying, and that's a huge contributor to cycle times as well. And you see big news sources sharing stories from consumers complaining that their car's been in the body shop for 6 months, but we see the side of it, you know, how they can't get parts. Just the situation is just crazy right now. And that's a big, how much do you find that contributes to the current bottleneck situation? Do you think it's a combination of the part shortage issue, material cost, and the tiny little nitty-picky things we're talking about? Or what are your perspectives on that?
With the parts shortage, actually,
yeah, just everyone in general, do we think that the parts shortage is a major contributor to cycle time right now, or do we think it's more of the nitpicky things that we need to focus on, smoothing out the bottlenecks, or is it is it fair to blame a lot of our delays and our cycle times on the parts shortage right now?
Ben, yes, it's out of the control of any controller that's controlling that claim. When there's no parts, the car just sits idle. It's undrivable in most cases. It's a huge problem, and I don't think anyone has a grasp on a situation like that yet. I just listened to everybody on this panel talk about parts being such a problem, and I just have to agree, it is a huge problem, and I wish somebody did have an answer for it. It affects every aspect of repair. Even when we get called in for a hail repair, they don't even have room for us because there's a couple cars there that have been there for 3 weeks. Like it affects everything.
I do think it creates an opportunity, though. Every time that our industry has challenge, and this has been a challenge over the last couple of years, and especially now with the supply chain issues, you can't make a part magically appear. You can't substitute something for it to make that problem go away. But it presents an opportunity for the shop that's experiencing that issue to look at their workflow and their processes and their standards to maximize and optimize the things that they can control, so that when they come out of this, they'll be in a much better place. And during that process, they'll soften the blow to a certain extent and mitigate some of those challenges that they have. Dominic alluded to, there's a couple of cars in that space. Well, they need to start looking towards, okay, when the parts do show up, where do I need those two vehicles? How can I position them? How can I organize my space that I do have? Where can I put those vehicles in the meantime? Thinking outside the box with ideas of being prepared for when the part does arrive and does get offloaded and the repair is ready to go. And so there's tons, I'm not saying I have the solution. I'm saying there's lots of shops, especially in the US, that have been working to optimize their workflows and have found opportunities to improve their efficiencies that they didn't even think about before because they weren't forced to. It's kind of like COVID forced us to do online or remote training. Now that's become the norm. So I think that's an opportunity that our shop owner customers really need to face.
Correct. And I really agree with what Chris just mentioned, because like the parts situation, a lot of the times that's out of the control of the shops. So the shops need to focus on what they can control, what kind of jobs they can bring in, what they can do, what they can do to help elevate their business, right? There's always a solution to every problem. You just have to find it. And I think there's a lot of shops in that situation right now, and they're working their way through it. They're focusing on what can I do instead of what can I not do.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm seeing an uptick more recently in people that are taking cycle time courses and production management, you know, where that's not needed for gold class recognition within iCar, but people are saying, you know, we recognize that there's probably ways that we could be running this better and stuff like that. And they're actively going out and trying to get that training in now while they can, so that way they can try and make things as efficient as possible. So I completely agree with what Brad and Chris were saying.
And really, to be fair, all it is a process change. Sometimes we do the same thing we just change it at the time we do it. And that will breed efficiency as long as you put it into the right slot at the right time. It will help.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of like the pandemic mindset when all of us were, not all of us, but when the repairs were dwindling and there wasn't as much work for us to do, people did focus on training. And that's kind of the same situation here now. There's nothing we can do. So we have to focus on what we can change what we know. And on Chris's point as well, not only does it present an opportunity for you to look at your processes and, figure out how you can make it better. And when the parts do come in, how you can make the repairs as efficient as possible. But it also gives you an opportunity to connect with your customers in a different way. Like I mentioned that a lot of media sources, news sources will post these articles about these cars that have been sitting there for however many days or 2 months or waiting for repairs. And all of that could be avoided if you explain to your customer in a proper way as to why the job's not getting done. It's out of your control, and we're always going to have those people that don't understand and refuse to understand. But it gives you an opportunity to try and make a relationship, a connection with your customer here. And I mean, if nothing else, you have that.
Yeah.
All right.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for Chris for turning it around to less of a negative topic and more of here are the opportunities for us in the current issue, because where we are facing a lot of challenges, we can't argue that this is a very exciting industry, and we're really blessed to have so much change, because we could just be sitting behind a desk doing the same process we've been doing for 50 years, but we change, we adapt, and we conquer. So technology right now is a persisting topic, whether it be working with digitized softwares or the computers on wheels we'll call cars today. But where do you think there's room for improvement in terms of modern technology? I mean, OEM training, OEM procedures, getting that and figuring out how OEMs can provide their procedures is definitely an area of improvement. But where do you think there's areas of improvement on the general scheme of things when it comes to body shops dealing with today's technology in cars?
Well, I'm going to take an early swing at this because, and if I get on my soapbox, knock me off, because this is a little bit of a passion point.
Oh, absolutely.
I sit on the National Automotive Service Task Force, and I'm on the board. And our challenge early on, 22 years ago, was to ensure that the aftermarket had the same access to service information that the OE franchise dealer did. And we accomplished that. And it's in place today. And the service information is there. The challenge is this: nobody reads the service information. They don't know how to read technical information with the objective of finding an answer to their question. They approach reading with the concept of, that's a 28-page process, I've got to read it all. Or if they're looking for an answer to a question on a diagnostic routine, they think they're going to have to read 10 pages of information to find what they're looking for. If they were taught how to read the technical information, read with discipline, and read with a goal in mind, they would ultimately find the answer quickly. And the second thing that I'll add to that addresses Tim's concern about, especially estimators trying to find those OEM repair procedures. They're there, and they have to search to find them. But we need, as educators, probably to come up with a way of teaching them and certifying them in each OEM system so that they know how to find what they're looking for. Because the OEMs don't build any of this to a standard. They build it to their own way of putting service information together, and much of it's done by third party. And so being prepared to search for that information and being disciplined in putting the time in to read, and having the skill set to read technical information, which doesn't mean you read every word. It's scanning titles, it's scanning bullet points, it's scanning for keywords. It's those things, and digital systems allow you to do that easily. So it takes practice, just like doing a brake job, just like applying seam sealer, just like painting a vehicle. It takes practice and skill to do that. And so I'll jump off my soapbox and let you opine.
I completely agree with you, Chris. No, I actually have heard the same from, I won't say specific names, but the person probably on the line here, it was from a paint gun manufacturer saying the same thing. When they walk into a lot of body shops, they're faced with a painter saying, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, well, have you read the technical data sheet? Have you read the spec sheet for your paint? Do you know what the manufacturer is recommending? And most of the times they've never read the technical data sheet, or they haven't in the last like however long. So I get it. And we're all guilty of it. I mean, trust me, I don't want to see a 28-page document sitting on my desk ready to read, but it's about using that Command F function and getting it into your real life and finding it, in the sheet, knowing where to look, and eventually with muscle memory, it'll come around. So that's a great point.
And just to
I don't want
touch
to
on
beat
that,
up. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I was just saying, just to touch on that, we all learn differently. And not a lot of people like to learn by reading, they like to learn by doing. And we find that the manufacturers, in most cases, don't support the training models for their vehicles and their products that they put out there. It's left to a lot of third party like ourselves, are all on this call, trying to supply training. And if I take us back to when I was in England, I worked in a dealer, and the dealer or the manufacturer offered lots of training, and we had to do so many training courses every year to make sure that we were always up to date with technology. And this is going back to the 80s and 90s. But unfortunately, I don't see it here very, very often.
Oops, you're muted, Allison.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we had this situation with SGI and the I always call it the SQARP program, with the this safe and quality repair program that happened a couple of years ago, where everyone was required to meet ICAR Gold Class, or I think it was certified collision care, also had a similar program. But programs like that, I mean, it's, as a body shop, you can see why it would be scary to have that kind of demanded of you, but it's also where the times are going. If we recognize that there's a problem in the industry at the grand scheme of things, and we need to address a problem, sometimes things like that have to be done. And it happened. And now Saskatchewan is doing great. So everything was fine. All right, so what about on the front of electric vehicles? I mean, it's still a little bit early before every body shop will be seeing them. The different locales in rural areas might be a little bit longer, but do you feel there's a general excitement from the industry about learning about electric vehicles, or is still kind of like scratching your head? Do you think people are scared, or I don't want to say charged up, but some people are scared, some people are excited. What do you feel?
From what I can gather out there in the field is a lot of shops are really embracing technology, that they're asking a lot of questions about the electronic vehicles. A lot of the questions I field are about the curing methods and the batteries. And of course, a lot of the electronic vehicle companies are putting pretty wild colors on their vehicles today. So we get a lot of questions about digital color retrieval, how to spray the colors, specialty finishes, stuff like that. But I find the majority of the shops, they're pretty excited with a lot of the manufacturers, a lot of the models that are coming out with the electronics. They're looking forward to it. They're bracing it. And they're seeing it as a shift in the industry, and you have to stay ahead of the curve and assuming that route.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what we're kind of hearing the same. What about Tanya, from your perspective at the top there? I mean, a lot of different things. Sorry, I think we're getting some feedback from somebody on the line here. If whoever's
Could be
getting
me.
it might be Chris is in the airport right now traveling. He's kind enough to join us. But Tanya, sorry, from your perspective in Ottawa there, what are you hearing from electric vehicles perspectives?
It's actually really interesting because I'm hearing very mixed things. Some people, you've got your early adapters who are just jumping on the bandwagon and saying, I want to learn as much as humanly possible. I want to be ahead of the curve on this. Like, give me all the information you possibly can on this topic. And you've got other people who are saying, I don't think this is going to last. They're not as environmentally friendly as people think they are. And therefore, it's going to go the way of the dinosaur really, really quickly. And therefore, they're digging their heels in and saying, I don't want to learn about this. So it's actually a really wide spectrum. We do have courses on it, and some people just eat it up. Like, as soon as we launch a course, they're wanting to devour it, and others are just, not wanting to participate. It's actually a very interesting perspective to see both sides of it.
Yeah, from our perspective, we kind of see regionally based too. There's leaders like in Quebec, they're so forward thinking about the materials for electric vehicles. So there's a lot of bigger shift there. Obviously in BC and the city centers in Toronto and Vancouver, you're seeing more electric vehicle, but then you get comments from people in Saskatchewan that there's, you go 200, 300, 500 kilometers and there's no chargers in between. So the infrastructure is not there yet. And very interesting that you've heard people say that it might go the way of the dinosaurs. Like that's dramatic to say that that's
I
extreme,
know.
but the federal government's announced mandates, guys. I don't know if we're going the way of the dinosaurs.
I know, and
Wow.
that's why it's so interesting to hear those kind of comments where people are saying, yeah, they're saying that now, but as soon as they realize, that they're not actually that environmentally friendly, like they're going to find the next technology to replace it. But again, like Canada is really wide. We've got shops that we deal with that are up in, the Yukon and stuff like that, and you're likely not going to see chargers up that way for a while.
Yeah, exactly. So that is, I mean, it could go that way very easily, where electric vehicles become the standard, and then there's something new that comes along. I mean, I'm sure when hydrogen cell vehicles and all these new things we were doing with hybrids, everyone thought that would be the standard. And is it? No, because we're moving towards EVs. So maybe it'll be a next big thing before we go.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are questioning the longevity of EVs as to how long they're going to be around, as to whether they really want to get dialed in on the training with them. It is important, of course, people know about the vehicles, the EVs, but of course, as hydrogen starts to take off as well, which is the pollutant than what EV is. So is hydrogen going to be the next big thing? So watch this space, and I'm sure in the next 10 to 15 years, we'll see a major movement towards hydrogen vehicles.
Absolutely.
So I'll add just a little color. I actually keynote on this topic probably a half a dozen times a year with various organizations, and have for the last 15 years. And there's several things in play here. Primary and most important is the consumer is not really looking to buy an EV today. They don't like the inconvenience of managing the power that they have on board. They don't like the time it takes to fill that battery to capacity so they can continue. They don't want to have to put a charging station in their home. They don't have a high level of trust in the technology at this point. That's number one. Number two is it's a political football in both of our countries. And so the politics will drive a lot of this. But at the end of the day, what you need to be aware of is what's going on in the background at the OEMs. And I am privileged to have many friends in engineering groups within most of the OEMs. And what they're working on does not match what they're advertising or what the administrations are challenging them to build. And what they're working on is the optimization of the ICE, the internal combustion engine, in a hybrid platform. And so you're going to see hybrids grow rapidly over the next 10 years. To the point where I'll give you an example. The Society of Automotive Engineers, I'm sitting north of Canada right now. I'm in Detroit. So SAE meets here in the spring every year, and the top 10 SAE technical papers that were authored and published for SAE Congress this year, all 10 dealt with new technologies to optimize the ICE, nothing to do with EV. So that should tell you where the head of the engineer is, where the funding is being placed by the OEMs, because that's where they're going to put their money in development so that they can build cars to put on the showroom floor, which if you drive by a dealership today, they don't have any of their own cars there. They have everybody else's cars there, which, is a whole nother topic that we can talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting stuff there, Chris. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying about the bridges, finding the bridges and building the bridges, and just by finding the gaps in your body shop of where you can improve. It's kind of like the OEMs are seeing the fact that consumers are not interested in this right now, regardless of all the surveys we see about people saying my next vehicle will be electric. Mine personally won't be. So who else is just saying that? I mean, a lot of people can't afford it right now too with the situation that we're in. So it's about finding a bridge, and really curious to find out more about what the OEMs are working on in terms of optimization in the ICE engine. Cool, awesome. So
You know, I just wanted to add something to this conversation. It was just a thought I had while he was talking there. When we were, can everyone hear me fine?
Yeah, yeah, we got
Yeah.
you, Dominic.
Good.
When we were all children, I remember the old timers specifically not ordering vehicles with power windows and air conditioning because stuff would break. And not everyone was on board with all the new technology. And 35, 40 years later, it's standard equipment in all these cars. So what I'm basically getting at here is I think we all know that where everything's going. And there's going to be some controversy, but it's still headed that way. So we all need to train up and get ready for this is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is no doubt that it's coming. It's a matter of time. The timing is probably further off than what is being advertised, which means we have time, but you can't dawdle and wait to get your team skilled, especially in foundation electronics. So
Yeah,
be
you got
prepared.
Yeah, you got it. And waiting, I think you'll watch the train go by.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. All right, so our last question was on the skills shortage. We already kind of touched on that a little bit, but if we could, we'll just bring it back around to, we kind of mentioned there was from what I've heard from some people in the industry, there's what we call the retention problem, but there's so many pressures on different businesses right now. Do you find that when you go into shops, do you think that you see anything that would speak to there being a retention problem or a problem with the way that body shops are treating their staff? Because personally, there's definitely one-on-one issues, but from general scope of things, this industry is really great to be in and it's connected, and that's just from my perspective. But what are you guys seeing from Tanya? You mentioned that it is frustrating for people to invest a lot into one person and then watch them go off to somebody else, and oftentimes that could be a competitor if you're in a saturated market. So how do you feel about the moving around, the retention problem? Is there something we can do to address this, or just about coming to terms with the fact that people move on faster than they used to?
Well, and I think there's a double-edged sword here in that, people are leaving and they're potentially going to competitors and all the rest of it. And in terms of training, people are going, well, all of that has now left, and we try and be as accommodating as possible to help people train up who is left over at the shop or a new hire that they bring in. But then it's also about, sorry, lost my train of thought there. It's in terms of what we can do about it, it's just trying to be understanding and trying to help people foster better relationships within each of the shops, because people that are happy with where they work are less likely to leave. And so it's about helping people kind of create that relationship in those internal environments and being understanding when something like that happens.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. I wanted to mention something that we do here at PDR Canada when we take a training class. Me as the controller, I own PDR Canada. I would train on a certain task ability. I would always have a few people, 2 to 3 people. Like, I know sometimes it's disruptive to our everyday day-to-day work schedules, and it could be a little costly, but it'll never leave us high and dry if someone decides to move to a different job. Like if I have one person trained to do something and they leave working for us, then we're dead in the water and we're starting at square one. So I will take the little bit of the beating, not having a couple technicians around for a day or two, and maybe spend a little more money, but I'll always try to train a few people, not just one person, on anything new that we do. So we're just not high and dry.
Sorry, Chris, I think I muted you there, but there you go. Perfect.
That's okay. I appreciate it, but and I apologize for the noise. There's 2 things that, in my opinion, deals with or affects retention. One is culture. Culture in your organization is king. If you don't have a culture that aligns with the people that you have working for you, they aren't going to stay. I don't care what else you do. 2 is you have to invest in the people that you have on staff. And by that, I mean you have to provide them a career path. Believe it or not, young people coming into our industry are, like we talk about it all the time, there's nobody wanting to come into the industry. Well, stand outside our industry and look inside and see if you would come to work in an industry that requires you to buy this and go through all the hoops and red tape it takes to get into the industry.
Mhm.
Contrary to belief, most technicians don't want to be a technician their whole life. And I've stood in front of thousands of technicians and shop owners and asked for a raise of hands. How many of you are technicians? And they raise their hand. How many of your shop owners? They raise their hand. And then I asked the technicians, how many of you in the last 6 weeks have had this thought? Is this all there is to this? Is this all I'm ever going to be? Raise your hand. And they raise their hands and I say, shop owners, look at your people. That's the challenge. You've got to give them a path that helps them become what they want to be. And it could be a shop owner. It could be an estimator. It could be something else within your organization. It could be a steak chef somewhere. Help them get there. That by
Yeah.
building a culture that fosters that, that's what retains people.
You know,
Exactly.
That,
And just
exactly.
Mhm.
go ahead.
I was
No,
going to say we've got a perfect example of this on the call. I mean, Brad was a technician up until you said 2017, right? So this is a perfect example of the different opportunities and paths you can put you on. And there's a lot of different people that work in jobbers, suppliers, insurers, different verticals of it that have started in the body shop. Sorry, Dominic.
Oh no, I
And
was
Brad.
just gonna say, Chris just nailed it right. That's thinking outside of the box. What he was talking about earlier.
Sure.
He blew me away. His little what he just said there. Like you don't think about things like that, but in all reality, people don't want to work till they're dead. So, I mean, it's harsh to say it that way, but that is what it is. And if you create a career path for them and they have something to look forward to, he's really opened my eyes. I really enjoyed that, Chris.
I would
I
like
think,
to
Appreciate
echo
that.
what
yeah,
Chris is
I
saying.
think as well, just to add on to Chris, is that there's always going to be a percentage of people that are going to move around. It's a very transient industry that we're in. And touching on, the culture is huge and the morale in the shop, and knowing your core people that you need to retain. What does my retention policy look like? How do I develop that? Because I need to keep people working for us. And it's a challenge everybody's facing.
It is. I have some shops where you can walk in and they've had the same core nucleus of guys for 20 plus years, and other shops where it seems like it's a bit of a revolving door, right? And from what I found and from my past experience and from talking to technicians who come to class and stuff, is the younger guys, they want opportunities. They want to be able to grow. They want to be able to grow their career, and they want opportunities that pique their interest. If you can satisfy that, give them the proper training, give them the proper opportunities, the chances of you retaining that employee or that talent for a long period of time increases dramatically, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Sorry,
adding
go
to that, it's about creating succession plans as well. So that way, what am I going to do if this technician who has been time, when they are ready to retire? It may not be that they're leaving for another shop. Just with age, people are retiring out of the industry, and having that succession plan of who is going to have that knowledge and come up and do that. And it's interesting to watch people cross train within a shop just for the sake of having knowledge. I know some technicians start taking some estimator courses because they're like, I want to understand what the estimator needs to do. And it's, estimators are like, well, how can I improve cycle time and stuff like that, and start learning, okay, what are the other jobs that are going on in the shop? So that way I can have a better grasp of how I can help somebody else with what my job is. And so the succession planning and the cross training, like it's like everybody is saying, it's about developing the people that are in the shop.
Yeah.
Just outlining that plan for them and the different verticals you can go to, and offering that kind of training, like Tanya is saying, it just shows a sense of support without you even actively trying to. It is, you are supporting them, you're supporting your staff, and they'll be really grateful for that. So I'm glad we brought up that topic. Some really good discussion points that made there. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to send them in the chat. We haven't got any questions throughout the session, but other than the topics that we've gone through today, if anyone has questions that come up afterwards, feel free to send them to me or Collision Repair Magazine. We'll be happy to spread them along to the panelists. But I just want to say thank you to the 5 of you for being here today. Thank you so much for making some time in your schedule and treating our audience to this thoughtful conversation. We can't thank you enough for being here and serving your insight.
No,
My
thanks for
pleasure.
Thanks for
having me.
having
This
us.
conversation was great. I enjoyed all the
Okay.
panelists. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. And a recording of this session will be available. We'll see you next time on another Open Dialogue webinar from Collision Repair. Hope you guys all have a great day.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Chris.
Bye.
Bye-bye.